Under the cloud of a crisis, economic policymakers and market watchers from all over the world gathered in Washington to discuss how to prevent the global economy from worsening further and plunging into stagnation. Topping the agenda was how to restore confidence in the world's largest economies.
Well, I think this is a very, very serious situation.
There's a danger of the whole system collapsing.
There's a very acute dilemma, but I do think there's a way out. In most of Europe and the US, there are big fiscal deficits, and so the scope for traditional Keynesian expansion is really very limited. But there is a collapse in confidence in consumers and investors, and so demand is going down. And so the government has to step in with a demand stimulus, but it can't do so in a way which undermines already very fragile confidence in the fiscal position.
Although the euro area is at the epicenter of the crisis, emerging markets are beginning to feel its effects.
From our perspective, so we are working in emerging Europe and in North Africa and the Middle East. And so if the big European banks cannot support their subsidiaries, that's a very serious situation for us.
About half of the capital that flew into Korea actually came from Europe. So we are very much affected.
And now we have a crisis in Europe. So the potential downside is actually as serious and even potentially more serious than it was in 2008.
Worries are also spreading to countries that depend on advanced economies for aid and trade.
I worry that developed countries, as they become more drawn into their own problems, neglect what's happening in the Middle East and the attention they ought to pay to that part of the world.
We've got great challenges, some of which have been shaped by what's happening in the global economy. We've got a very weak shilling. This year alone, the shilling has lost value by about 16%. This has not happened in 17 years.
When America gets a cold, we suffer. Our policies are geared towards them. We have a lot of aid to support our economies from them. And remember, they're the biggest buyers of our raw materials. So they're the biggest contributors to our economy. So the minute they have problems, it sprinkles down to us.
While the problems the world faces are largely economic, the solutions are largely political.
Although we live in a global economy, we know that there is no global jurisdiction.
When the euro itself was created, European leaders understood that this is a political project first and foremost, rather than an economic one.
These regional arrangements, they have a weakness that they are often too dependent on each other, and it's very difficult to enforce discipline, and that's where IMF ultimately comes in.
The way out of the European and American nightmare is to increase government spending on investment at the same time as we somewhat reduce government spending on recurrent consumption. This will be politically unpopular, but it will dig us out of the dangers of a deeper recession.
What's important is to see more consensus and less acrimony over small issues here and there, because the big picture is really what's important to focus on right now.